Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council briefing for the 16th of August 2022. Welcome you all this evening. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja this evening and pay respects to elders and past and present. Also, good to know that we're dealing with our latest Innovate wrap as part of this council briefing and meeting next Tuesday night. All the better and richer for having been meeting with our elders who have taken a partnership approach with us on that document. Apologies, members on leave of absence. We have a full house of councillors this evening in person. Nice to see you all in person. So I'll move to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome, members of the public gallery. Very nice to have you here this evening. You're ready to go, so please come forward. We just ask that you state your name, the suburb in which you reside and the item that you're speaking to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Good evening, councillors and staff. My name is Daniela Merger from Urbanista Town Planning, 231 Bulwer Street, Perth. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the landowners and in support of the officer's recommendation for approval for a new two-storey single house at number 72, The Boulevard, Mount Hawthorn. So that's item 5.2. The subject site is located on the corner of Larne Street and within the Boulevard character area. Whilst the policy encourages the retention of the original dwelling, the area is not a heritage area and therefore approval for demolition is not required. Notwithstanding, the key objective of the city's character and heritage area policy, more broadly, is to ensure that new development is sympathetic to the unique character of the streetscape. In terms of community consultation, the original plans were advertised in May and received 7 objections and 5 submissions of support. The key objections raised were in relation to the upper floor setback to the boulevard and the bulk and scale of the development as presented to the street. These plans were also referred to the city's DRP heritage expert for comments. The initial feedback from the DRP member was largely in relation to the impact of the upper floor setback to the street, as well as providing some advice on amendments to the facade design features. We then worked collaboratively with the city's officers and the architects to provide a design response that now results in all greens and full support from the DRP's heritage expert, and the reduction of objections from 7 to 3 when these amended plans were re-advertised. Whilst the application is for a new dwelling on the site, the proposal before council this evening has been designed to be of a sympathetic style to the interwar dwellings within the boulevard character area. The dwelling incorporates architectural design elements, including an asymmetrical presentation to the street, a large front veranda and porch, pitched roof form with gables, a weatherboard external facade, timber balustrades, and multiple pane windows. The proposed street setback is entirely consistent with the existing streetscape, and the upper floor has been designed to be set back well behind the ground floor building line. Additionally, the dwelling includes a garage from the rear right-of-way, allowing the front setback area to be landscaped with mature trees, garden beds, and open grass spaces. The proposal does include a reduced lot boundary setback to the site's northern boundary. However, as provided in attachment 7 of the agenda report, we have comprehensively demonstrated that the proposed setback satisfies each relevant design principle of the R codes and the city's policies. Overall, the proposed dwelling has been thoughtfully designed to reflect the statement of character of the Boulevard and Matlock Street character area. As a result, the proposal is supported by the city's administration and the DRP heritage expert, and we ask the council to follow suit and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Nice to see you. Next speaker, please.
Barbara Abbott, North Perth. Item 6.4, trial diversion at Leek and Alma. I have sent a letter and raised my issues. I'm not going to repeat that. I have some other points I'd like to raise. So really it's based on the fact that I think the briefing note is poor. There are omissions and some incorrect information. And I really ask that you listen to residents on this because we're living with this. So it's really, really important. Something needs to change. I don't know what in particular, but something needs to change with Alma and Leek. This is not a new issue. We've been raising this for about 15 years and we repeatedly raise the issue and no one can come up with the right idea yet. So when it came to trialling a diversion, it was like, well, why not try something? You know, it was the only thing that was offered. And now to have the idea of that not being accepted is really quite disturbing. So the City of Vincent staff have not provided any other options. They just landed on the diversion. The problem we have is largely with driver behaviour. So there are stop signs on on Alma. People just drive straight through them. They don't just drive straight through them, they drive through them at speed. And they also drive through them on the wrong side of the road because it's a dog leg. So they just don't bother dog legging, they just go straight over. And look, it's not every driver, but when you see it, you just hold your breath. It's really, really frightening. And it's usually trucks. And it's still at speed. It's not just, you know, gently crossing the road. Now, diversions have been successful elsewhere. This, I don't think, has been discussed reasonably by council, but having a look at the ones in Mount Lawley, you know, they've been there for years and highly successful. Predictions about the traffic flow using laneways or cutting through other streets is just speculation. I looked at the laneways. I can't see anyone wanting to cut down any of the laneways. They're tiny, narrow laneways with speed bumps all through them. So I think that is highly speculative, really. I mean, there's no reason. The nearest laneway has parking in it. There's a business that parks vehicles in it. So no one's going to use that one either, which is another issue that could be addressed. With regard to dependence on the consultation information, it just doesn't ring true. I know that my comments aren't reflected in it. And then I saw another comment from someone in Seacombe Street commenting about the aged care facility in View Street, about ambulances not being able to get through. A bizarre comment. The ambulances do come to View Street because that's where the ambulance bay is. So, you know, these comments seem to have been, I don't know, picked from...
Barbara, have reached 3 minutes. So if you, if you could just get to your final points, that would be appreciated.
So yeah, my final comment is please don't accept the information reflected in this document. I do consider it a flawed report and therefore a flawed recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Mayor and councillors, for yet again having me up here. Again, it's item 6.4, as Barbara has spoken to, the outcome of the 12-month diversion trial. Specifically addressing that, the report.
Geraldine, I'll just state, we do know who you are, but just for the record,
Oh,
Geraldine.
I'm sorry, Geraldine Box, 129 Alma Road, North Perth.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Sorry, Mayor. The report provided by the administration contains a number of discrepancies. Barbara has alluded to them. I'll just outline them a little bit more. I did put them in letter to councillors and Mayor earlier this week. The number of respondees varies, 85 in one part of the report, 83 in another part. The report states that 77% of respondees to the 12-month trial were against the trial. Looking at the numbers provided in the report, this is inaccurate. Based on 83 people, there are 55% against and 45% in support of the diversion. A further issue arises as is a group of 13 with an NA title against their name. We're given an explanation, no explanation for that group. Are they residents in the street in the area or not? We don't know. If you remove those 13, the outcome is 51% against the trial and 49% in support. That's significantly different from the 77% stated. The administration report notes that there'll be a negative impact on the road network and that there's a lack of community support. Neither of those two aspects have been objectively demonstrated in the report. There's no traffic count data provided either. The negative aspects is on the residents of Alma Road and Leek Street, who are now exposed to increased noise from trucks and trailers going over the speed humps. They are not plateaus, they're elongated speed humps. A continuing day and night with trucks and cars. Without the diagonal closure at Leek and Alma, we residents have been left in very much worse situation than prior to the humps going in. In conclusion, I ask councillors, please, as elected members, please look again at the report, make a decision to reject the administration's negative recommendation on the diagonal diversions and to recommend in turn that the 12-month trial of the diagonal diversion at Leek and Alma to go ahead as soon as possible with the implementation of the 40-kilometre our area zone for the area. This is a key step that needs to be taken to ensure Alma Road and Leek Street return to being local streets. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Are there any further speakers this evening? Okay, thank you very much all for your comments. Really appreciate you being here this evening. We will move to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Oh, excuse me, before we do that, just to note that we did receive written questions from one submitter on Charles Vyard Reserve and lighting, not on tonight's agenda, but those questions will be included in the and answers will be included in the following council meeting report. Yep, okay. So item 4, declarations of interest. Thank you, CEO.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Through you, received 2 declarations of interest. The first being from yourself, Mayor Cole. You declared an impartiality and potential financial interest in item 5.2, 72 The Boulevard, Mount Hawthorn proposed single house, noting the extent of the interest being that you have family members living on the boulevard, noting the close association of this family relationship. You sought advice from WALGA to clarify the potential extent of the interest and a financial interest may be possible or perceived. On this basis, Mayor Cole will not participate in the debate nor vote on this matter. Councillor Iopolo declared a financial interest in relation to item 11.1, claim for reimbursement, legal costs, the extent of the interest being that he stands to benefit financially from approval of this recommendation. He will not participate in the vote nor vote on the matter. That's all, Mayor Cole.
Sorry, can I just clarify, is that not participate in discussion and vote or just vote?
The declaration, Councillor Iopolo will not participate in the debate nor vote on the
Okay,
matter.
thank you. Thanks, Councillor Flo. Okay, well, the first item that we will be dealing with this evening will be 5.2. So I'll just ask the Deputy Mayor to come to the chair and I'll vacate the chamber.
Thank you, everybody. Can I have questions on item 5.2, 72 The Boulevard, Mount Hawthorn? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of queries around the trees on the site there. The report refers to additional trees would be useful on the boulevard, but I don't see a recommendation or a requirement for those trees to be included on the boulevard. So I just wondered, do we need a specific condition that says that there'll be 2 additional trees planted on the boulevard?
Through the chair, I think what the report was alluding to was that the plans had been amended to include 2 trees within the front setback area and that would result in improved development outcome for the boulevard. The advice we've received is that there is no ability for additional tree planting on the boulevard based on the type of trees that we have there already.
So that was one half of my second question. The second half is on Larne Street. I noticed there's 2 existing trees, but there's potentially space between 2 of those trees, and then also to the east of the existing trees as well for additional trees.
Yes, through the chair. So we believe that 2 additional verge trees could be incorporated on Lion Street. They could be melaleucas. So if you would like, we can amend the existing landscaping condition to include that as part of the briefing notes.
Sure. So do I need an amendment or or administration will look at it and amend that? Okay. And I did want to clarify first. I wasn't clear on if the proposal met the 30% tree canopy coverage. It refers to the number of trees, but I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, what percentage of canopy cover it's achieved.
Through the chair, I believe on page 12 of that agenda item, the site doesn't achieve the 30% canopy cover, it achieves 17.5.
Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just wondering if you could outline, I think this is the first item we've had before council that's considered the character retention requirements in this area. And if you could just outline the process of assessing against that policy and how this recommendation has been arrived at.
Yep, through the chair. So the character retention guidelines work similar to the R codes, and where elements duplicate the requirements of the R codes, those provisions augment or replace the provisions of the R code, similar to the way that the built form policy works. So the application's been assessed against the applicable requirements of the character guidelines, and where those elements don't meet the requirements of the guidelines, then we've undertaken an objective assessment against those. For clarity purposes, on page 4 and 5 of the agenda report, where an element relates to the character guidelines, we've specifically stated that. And where an element relates to the built form policy or the R codes, it's specifically stated. And justification has been provided against the objectives of the policy and the outcomes that the policy seeks to achieve in terms of the built form.
Thank you. So it's a similar process to where it departs from the deemed to comply. You're looking at the objectives generally to see that it meets them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And can you just clarify? I wasn't quite sure the position with the existing fence. In the at the beginning of the report, it mentions that it doesn't form part of the approval because it wouldn't satisfy those requirements of the character retention. But is there any proposal for that to change?
Through the chair, so the initial application did propose a modified fence. The applicant's chosen not to pursue that at this stage and is electing to retain the existing street fence. As that's not proposed to be modified, it's not subject to assessment against the guidelines.
Okay, thanks. And just finally, given that the canopy coverage is significantly lower than deemed to comply, were there any options that administration could see to improve that?
We do believe that the landscaping has come some way from the initial proposal. I think the initial application proposed about 4% canopy cover. We've been able to work with the applicant through those increased setbacks to get those jacarandas in the street setback, which will provide quite significant canopy cover. And that is a substantial improvement on what the application initially proposed.
Okay, so are you of the view that there's not really much more scope?
Yes, based on the design of the proposal and the available areas for planting, what we've been able to achieve, we believe, is the maximum extent that we could get based on the setbacks provided. It is noted that it does comply with the R code's landscaping requirements and that these canopy cover requirements are in addition to those provisions.
Thank you.
Anything further? No. Okay, we'll call Mayor Cole back in. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Konchevsky. The next item that was raised is 6.2, outcome of 12-month diagonal diversion trial. Proposed reduction of speed limit within area bounded by Charles, Fitzgerald, Angove and Vincent Streets. This might need to say outcome of advertising because we haven't actually had the trial. Questions, councillor Hallett?
Who would this be directed to currently?
Through you, Mayor Cole, could I introduce to council our new manager of engineering, Mr. Luke McGurks, joining us from the city of Fremantle. And you get all the tricky questions from now on, Luke. So welcome.
And prior to that, County Armagh, that's where my husband also hails from.
Mhm.
Welcome, Luke. Pleasure to have you.
And
Week 1 as well, so go gentle.
straight into North Perth traffic. And Luke, you just need to press that red button in response to questions.
Thanks, Luke. Go ahead, councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm very happy for this to be all on notice if needed. While some trials might need a length of 12 months to ascertain success, can I just ask whether admin has any mechanisms or suggested triggers for establishing if a trial should be abandoned if there's significant negative impacts?
Through the chair, the 12-month duration for trials is quite typical to give you a holistic set of data. So we would record during the trial how traffic movements have been going. For the diagonal trial, during community consultation, we did see some negative comments, or it wasn't supported. There is no formal mechanism in the city of Finson at the moment to do like a traffic warrant. That's something the team will be working on. So yeah, there is just a high level desktop traffic analysis, which the team have done. And we viewed that if there was a diagonal closure of Alma Street and Lake Street, it would have negative impacts to the surrounding roads, increased traffic volumes and increased speeds in adjacent roads. So yeah, so the administration wouldn't support the diagonal closure for them reasons.
I mean, I guess one of my follow-up questions is partly to do with that, in that administration said that it would impact on access north and south and east and west. Perhaps it's a rhetorical question, but isn't that the point of putting in a diagonal diversion? And we're just assuming that they go down laneways.
Through the chair, yes, the traffic flow would be affected north and south and east and west. The main focus would be looking at the high level desktop traffic analysis and what the traffic would do. And we wouldn't want to be potentially solving one problem and diverting traffic to another street and creating another issue. I believe there has been recent traffic calming on Alma Street, and we have done some traffic counts, so we can see over the last 5 years that the traffic volumes have decreased, speeds have decreased, and with the traffic calming solutions of the plateaus will head that traffic calming measures in the right direction for that location.
Thank you. And just in terms of if a trial was to go ahead, in terms of the evaluation of it, presumably counters would be put down to assess that. Is there any topographical reason why counters can't be put in laneways as well? Could that also be included as part of an evaluation?
Through the chair, yes, we can put traffic counters in laneways. Yep, that'd be something we can do.
Thank you. There was a comment from the public gallery about the plateaus were more like speed bumps. Can we clarify, I guess, what the difference is and what went ahead and why there might be some confusion about what treatments were actually implemented?
Through the chair, plateaus are designed to main road standards, similar to speed humps. So a plateau basically slows the traffic with a gradual incline for the vehicle to mount the plateau. A speed bump would be a more sort of robust impact to slow traffic down. So generally, speed humps would have a more immediate impact in slowing traffic down immediately, where a plateau would generally slow the traffic down, allow speed to increase, and then slow down again when the vehicle gets off the plateau. So generally larger and less of a bumpy impact, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. And just the last one was one of the other folks from the audience asked about or mentioned that there was commercial parking happening in a laneway and whether admin's aware of that, if that can be followed up if that's not actually allowed.
Through the chair, yeah, we'll take that on notice. Generally, there is no parking allowed in laneways, but yeah, we just need to look into that individual case. That's all. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Cole, could I just add something on the plateaus? The biggest complaint we get about speed bumps tends to be around the noise, and the plateaus, because of the gentle incline in the car then mounts the plateau then goes down. That does tend to reduce that noise of the bump. And the feedback we've got in this report so far have been that the raised plateaus have been very well received by the community. I didn't see any negative comments about them, but a lot of welcoming comments since they've gone in.
Councillors, Councillor Oplow and then Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at other options because, my question is, do we think or consider a trial period less than 12 months? I know that you're saying it's good to get a whole year of data, but it wouldn't even a 3-month period rather than just discounting it to get altogether. Why wasn't a smaller period considered valuable?
Through the chair, we can look at smaller durations of trial periods. To do the version itself, it costs money to implement the infrastructure, and if we can implement and spend that money and get a longer duration of the trial, it's probably best practice. But yeah, we certainly can look at a shorter duration of the trial. However, community consultation has come back and it isn't supported by the community, so it's just something to consider as well.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to add to that question, and Councillor Loden might have a better memory than me. I think when administration first put this recommendation of a diagonal diversion to council, it was for a shorter trial duration of 6 weeks. And then we did modify our recommendation around that when we proceeded to recommend the raised plateaus to council. So the initial thought was around 6 weeks, and that's changed since the council's second resolution on the raised plateaus to consult on a 12-month trial.
So in terms of just all the options that were looked at here, because obviously it's, as the member of the public had mentioned, this is a long-standing issue, and it just seems like the recommendation is saying that it's a do nothing but wait for the 40 kilometres per hour. So I'm really just interested in covering the other options that was considered as part of the consultation, and why are we landing at somewhere where we're just going to rely on the speed limit when the member of the public have said that people are speeding anyway. So I don't think enforcement is our issue, but it doesn't sound like.
I'm just wondering if you're asking a question or making a statement.
I think there was a question in there. I'm really trying to explore the other options.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might just answer. So this has been a 4-year journey on North Perth, and it took the better part of 2 to 3 years for us to land on the option funded by Marion Roads of the raised plateaus. We would say that's the most positive big engineering impact, and they have now been installed. So that was one. The decision on installing the raised plateaus then had 2 subsequent decisions, I'd say of potentially lesser import than the whole area raised plateaus, which have now been put in, and those were seeking community input on that proposal for a diagonal diversion just on one road, not the network of roads that the raised plateaus have gone in, plus with the raised plateaus seeking Main Roads approval to drop the speed limit from 50 to 40. So we've made a lot of progress after a long period of time on this, and the diagonal diversion was just one smaller subsidiary element for one road compared to the network approach we've taken on raised plateaus and the speed zone.
Final question, what's the estimated cost? It sounds like it's a fixed cost from your previous answer. What's the estimated cost to put in this diagonal trial?
Through the chair, the cost hasn't been detailed, obviously, because we would need a detailed design to do so. Through my experience, these types of treatments could cost anything between 35 and 60 grand, depending on what is required, much traffic control is required, and certain other things. So the range between 35 and 60,000 would be ballpark. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm stuck. Very happy for these questions to be taken on notice, and welcome to Vincent. I just wondered if you could give an outline of how you anticipate the trial diversion will be implemented. Is it infrastructure that would have to be installed and then removed, or is it more likely to be temporary barriers like water barriers and those sorts of mechanisms?
Through the chair would be concrete curbing, brick paving, maybe some soft landscaping, and we would do the trial for the period of 12 months and then reevaluate. So if the trial was successful, more than likely keep the traffic calming measure in place, or if it wasn't successful, then we would have to remove and reinstate what was there previously.
So would there be an option if it was a shorter period of time to have a less permanent infrastructure or diversion implemented so that it was easier to remove and less cost?
Through the chair, the details generally goes to main roads for endorsement, so we would need to run that past main roads. Generally, my experience would be there would need to be concrete curbs and brick paving, soft landscaping. So generally like a more permanent solution than the temporary water-fill barriers, because generally the temporary water-fill barriers, you'd have traffic control, increased costs, it'd be a temporary solution, and yeah, main roads might in favour of that, that's all.
Okay, I'd be grateful if there was some information in the report for next week on that, because I know in the past we have, when we did a temporary diversion of the no right turn off Brady onto Perslow, that was water barriers for quite a period of time before it was made permanent, but that was a number of years ago, so it might have changed since then. I had a similar question to Councillor Iapolo about shortening the time, and I'm just wondering what would be the minimum that you would think is possible to get enough data?
Through the chair, as the CEO spoke about the 6-week period, if it was presented previously, engineering would have looked into that. So that would be something the 6-week period could go back on the table for that duration to run it through. It's just the cost of the trial for, you know, such a decent size chunk of money for a short duration is probably not ideal. That's all.
Okay, and just there were questions raised in the gallery about the consultation numbers and in particular what the 13 NA people were who were referred to. And I'm just wondering if in the report for next week, if we could just have some clarity on those numbers and whether those people perhaps are not in the area or whether that changes the percentages as reported. Thanks. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just going back to the April meeting agenda, and because I haven't been on the ground there in a while, my understanding is that there's currently no traffic calming intervention at this intersection at all, is there? But there is at all the other intersections of Leake Street and all the other intersections of Alma. Is it considered that that is something that's lacking, given that we are trying for a holistic approach to traffic calming in this area? Like if administration's recommendation is do nothing, and yet every other intersection has something, why is it okay to do nothing at this intersection?
Through the chair, my understanding was from reading previous council minutes was there was a broader picture traffic study done to traffic calm certain streets. So there would have been a desktop high level study on the adjacent streets, including that intersection. And this item was put into the mix for administration to go and specifically look at a diversional closure in that intersection. Doesn't mean we couldn't go back and look at a different treatment in that space.
Could I just recommend perhaps, request in the briefing notes a consideration of of what a four-way plateau might look like at that intersection, something similar to what's in place at, yeah, I'm going to say maybe Camellia, but no. Anyway, on the corner of the monastery, there's a four-way plateau on the plans. If I could just get some assessment as to the suitability of that for this intersection. And also perhaps the report might benefit just from a brief summary of the reason that other treatments have been discounted for this area. I believe that we have spoken about in the chamber before about closing the street and having a turning circle and the assessment around that. And then I guess also assessment around, I don't know, roundabout at that intersection, just so that we can tidy that stuff up if we're looking. And I guess, and then also if the traffic counts and commercial vehicle traffic passing through that intersection would be really useful. I just couldn't find it just then, to confirm in relation to the residents' comments around the truck traffic travelling from Charles Street to the supermarket. And you've sort of said that they've reduced. If we could just get that over a couple of years, that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. So similar to what Councillor Castle raised around the 13, I did want to clarify, it says 77% in the report, but the numbers that I saw looked a lot closer. I didn't actually do the math, but I think Geraldine suggested it was 45 versus 55%. So it'd be great if we could clarify that. I also noticed that there's strong levels of support in some streets and not in others. And I was wondering if it'd be possible to get like a map to sort of show which streets, because I suspect that'll give us an indication of that. Also sort of flags to the concerns that people have. I was wondering, last week the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group met, and this didn't come as an item to that. So I was just wondering why we didn't bring that for consideration to the group to get some feedback from community experts on that one.
Through Mayor Cole, could I just clarify why the results of the consultation weren't brought to the stag? We can bring those to the stag to the next meeting if council wants to defer this item, but that'll be up to council.
No worries. There was concerns about vehicles moving to other streets flagged. Does the administration have a view on, because I imagine some of those other streets would actually be the main distributors that go around the outside where we want to see traffic flowing. Would you be expecting that more would be going to those streets, or be cutting through the middle, or is that kind of the purpose of doing the trial, to see where those vehicles go?
Through the chair, yes, mostly the district distributing roads would have traffic cutting through, where you wouldn't expect a large volume to go back on the district distributing roads. We would expect adjacent local roads to be the cut throughs. Instead of Alma Street, they would use Few Street or another adjoining street close by.
Just a note on the 6 week, if we do shorten the duration of the trial, my recollection when we were talking about this was there was some issues around main roads and how long we had to notify them. I don't know exactly what, but that might be worth just checking if there is a change, and if we do change the duration, so we don't get ourselves into grief there. And so this came about because of a petition that was submitted to council in 2018, which raised the issue of traffic speed, but also traffic volume. And so I'm curious, because this should have ultimately be about also dealing with that issue of volume. How does a 40 kph speed limit and raised plateaus address the issue of traffic volume on those streets?
Through the chair, the speed reduction obviously improves the safety of the road. It would slow traffic down, and generally other traffic, if they want to move quickly through that area, would try to choose another street that has a higher speed limit. So it could reduce the numbers, but definitely will be benefit in regards to safety.
If raised plateaus are potentially a barrier to people going through that area and going around the outside, wouldn't a diagonal diversion be an even stronger barrier to people going around, going through the middle of the site?
Through the chair, it would benefit Alma Street. But the adjacent streets would have, it's expected that the traffic volumes would increase. So Alma Street, again, has been traffic calm with the raised plateaus. We've got traffic data that states they're slowing down, traffic volumes is reducing. So yeah, we would just, we wouldn't want to increase traffic on adjacent streets.
If council was to form a view that they wanted to continue with the trial, is a 40k per hour trial and the diagonal diversion mutually exclusive? Do we need to do one or the other? Or is it a case of we can do the diagonal diversion and also do the 40k per hour trial?
Through Mayor Cole, just to clarify, the proposal isn't for a trial of the 40Ks, it's for a permanent 40K zone. Just to clarify that, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
And if council's the view to do this, we don't have a recommendation to proceed, so we would need to amend that to proceed. But is that then an amendment or is that an alternative recommendation?
Through the chair, it'd be an alternate recommendation.
And can I request that an alternative recommendation be prepared to that effect, please?
It can be.
Through Mayor Cole, can I just double check on the time period as well, because there's been some discussion, the alternate for 12 months or a different time period?
So I think we'll getting some advice through the briefing notes on that. I'm happy for administration to form a view on what they think is preferred, if their preference is for 12 months versus 6 months, 3 months, and then we can debate it or amend it and then re-amend it. But at least that gives us a starting point.
Councillors, I had a few questions. Manager, you're doing very well, by the way. Excellent responses to all of the questions. I just wanted to ask in relation to, so some of this is probably recapping on what people have asked, but maybe bringing some threads together. You talked about the desktop study that's been undertaken. I just wondered whether it would be easy to do a simple diagram to show the sort of flow that you think traffic would move into, for example, go to Coles and then travel north or south, just like, you know, some arrows on a page just to sort of give a representation of where you think those alternate traffic flows would happen. You emailed us earlier today to talk about existing data and showing that that there has been a steady reduction over the last 5 years regarding traffic volumes, average speeds and 85th speeds. I thought that was really great information to have. It would be awesome to see that in the council report so that that's reported and publicly available. Also just was interested to know, given that the plateaus have just gone in when the first post-plateau measurements were scheduled to be taken. And it would be also interesting just picking up on Councillor Gontaszewski's request to look at that sort of very long plateau, what the cost of that would be versus the cost of a trial. There's been a lot of commentary around the NAs in the survey data, and I know that in previous situations, sometimes personal information around locations can be provided to council members if people have said they don't wish for it to be publicly available. So I just wondered, is there another layer of information there about location that could be provided to council members? And when you're looking at maybe mapping out the street by street responses, it might be easy just to do a simple tally per street, yes and no. I don't think we need to worry about 40Ks. I think that's not the point of contention, just the diagonal diversion. And there was a question around successful diversions in other locations. So if there's any commentary from administration on successful diversions like Mount Lawley, or, you know, any thoughts on that, I think that would be helpful. And there was a comment that the comments in the feedback from community weren't reflective. So I just wondered whether it might be useful just to have another look, just to see whether that captures the commentary appropriately. And that was it from me. Councillor Loden.
Sorry, just one further question. Because we are looking at the numbers around percentage of support and not support, if there had been greater support for this than opposed, would the city have changed their view and be recommending supporting the proposal? Or is it because of the issues that were raised by those not supporting it that it's not supported?
Through the chair, from a technical engineering perspective, it still wouldn't be supported by administration. We're just concerned that we're shifting one issue to another street, and without doing the detailed traffic modelling, it's really difficult to tell how much of that or what volumes would be in certain streets. We can certainly do the traffic flow diagram at a high level, but it's the detailed modelling that costs some money to do, that would give us the accurate reflection. So it still wouldn't be supported even if there was community support.
Councillor Hallett.
I guess this is before your time, but in that case, why was it suggested by administration in the first place?
I think that needs to be directed to the CEO. I don't think that's a question for the new manager.
Through Mayor Cole, Councillor Loden might help me out again on this one. The proposal for this diagonal diversion came from one of the community members on the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group. It didn't come from administration.
That's
my
that's not
recollection.
I mean,
yeah.
once something's recommended through a council report to council, it's on the recommendation of administration. I mean, that's just the reality of the way councils and administration operate.
We didn't say we didn't support the idea, but it wasn't our idea in the first place. It was put forward by a community member who's a member of the STAG, and we put that to council.
With all due respect, there was a proposal that was put forward, but I believe it was canvassed or discussed at a meeting with councillors and administration. I don't think that it was something that was directly responsible from that proposal that came forward. But yes, I do note that in the report from April, there is diagrams of how it could look. And the report from April also does state that it could be constructed of temporary infrastructure. So perhaps we could just get some references to that.
Councillors did predict this would be the item with the most number of questions. Has been a long running issue. Okay, ready to move to the next item. All right, thank you very much, Manager. Well done. Moving on then to item 5.1, 357 Lord Street Highgate, proposed mixed use development. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I have one very brief question on this one, and it just relates to the parking. In the report, it says that the cafe is assessed as, or the applicant has said that they feel that there will be 5 people within the cafe at any one time. And I just wondered if that is, if the parking calculation is based on their assessment of the numbers of people that are likely to be there, and then if that has any flow-on effects in terms of like indoor and outdoor seating that might be part of the development. I did notice from their little render that there was 6 people in the outdoor alfresco part of the development. but I guess it just got me thinking about how we would, because I mean, I could start a business and say we're only going to have 2 people coming, and then what do you know, 150 turn up. So I guess I just wanted to find out how it's reflected in the calculations.
Through you, Mayor Cole. So the applicant didn't provide a specific number of firm patron numbers, which is what we would usually use to assess the parking requirements for the application. They've indicated that based on the size and scale of the proposal, they think it's going to be more of a local neighbourhood coffee window for people that live within proximity to it, and it's unlikely to be a destination cafe. And on that basis, they've suggested that it would perhaps have at any one time 1 staff member, 5 patrons, so the 6 people in the picture, and that would be equivalent to 1.5 bays, and they've provided 2 bays, 1 car bay within for that. And that's given the site's accessibility to major transport routes, that there would be opportunity for staff members travelling to the site to utilise that. There's also on-street parking that's time limited that would potentially cater for any customers coming to the site that weren't from the local area walking.
Councillor Arplo and then Councillor Loden.
Thank you. Just to follow up from Councillor Gontachevsky's question, is there any licensing requirements for a cafe where there is a maximum number of patrons allowed that we can also reference just to cross-check her question?
Through the chair. So if this is proposed as a cafe, at this stage, they haven't indicated that they would be seeking a liquor license. At that point, there are capacity limits that may come into effect. As part of this application, that's not required. We're not required to consider that. If it was going to be perhaps a public building under the health requirements, then that would also trigger capacity limits. But again, as this is a cafe, those requirements don't come into consideration as part of this application.
Go ahead, Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a query on trees again. There looks to potentially be the potential to add 2 additional trees in Broome Street and on Lord Street. I was just wondering if the staff had looked at that at all.
Through you, Mayor Cole, there is potential for potentially 2 trees on Broome Street, and that is already captured by condition 6.3. In regards to Lord Street, the advice we've received is that that verge width is quite narrow, and until construction's completed, we wouldn't know if there's going to be capacity there. And Park's request was that we wait until occupancy, and then we can consider whether or not there's potential for an additional tree there.
Councillors. Okay. Next item is 5.3, 31 Smith Street, Highgate, proposed alterations and additions to place of worship. Councillor Loden.
Just a query, because there's no items for discussion. Why did this have to come to council?
Through you, Mayor Cole. The subject site is state heritage listed. So as part of the previous review of delegations, we did introduce some delegations for state heritage listed sites, but they're largely tailored around residential proposals. So this isn't captured in that. Our suggestion would be when we next do the review of the delegations, we'll try and seek some delegation for minor works such as this. And then that would avoid this potentially needing to come to council.
Maybe I'm running it too hard. Any further questions on this one, Councillor Hallett?
Just a query that there's no interpretation that this would be considered signage.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we thought about signage, we thought about an external fixture, we thought about many options. We didn't believe it fell within any of the existing delegations, unfortunately.
New category in the signage policy. Any further questions? Okay. Item 5.4, amendment to the trees of significance inventory to include the jacaranda tree at 81 Coogee Street, Mount Hawthorn. Councillor Loden.
I think it's the same question I just asked. And I believe we're working through an easier process to put trees on here. So I was just hoping to get an update on that so that we don't require a council resolution to add a tree.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct. We are currently in the process of reviewing our trees of significance policy due to resourcing that will be carried over from it will take the entire 22-23 financial year.
Couldn't we just do that through the review of the delegations each year? Is it not a bit more simple than a review?
To you, Mayor Cole, we believe that it's probably more appropriate to review the policy at the same time so that there is clarity on, I suppose, the types of trees that will go in as well as how they're determined.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Gontaszewski?
Oh, sorry, this is just relates to the report, and it appeared that there was some requirements in terms of like being issues identified needing to be addressed within a tree management plan, and just I guess confirmation that those works are going to be done, but we're not putting something on a list that's just about to fall over if it doesn't get treated right, are we?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's right. Because this tree is on private property and it was nominated by that private property owner, it will be their responsibility and the city will work with them to assist, but it will remain the responsibility of the nominator.
Councillors, okay. The next item is 5.5, advertising of amended character and heritage areas policy for Orange Avenue and Hope Street. Any questions? Manager, I was just interested to know whether there was a, within the 55%, whether that was sort of clustered in one section of the street, noting that they sort of blend into, Orange sort of blends into Hope. I was just interested to know whether there was a cluster or whether it was sort of more evenly spread across Hope and Orange.
To you, Mayor Cole, I'll include those in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, item 5.6, advertising of amended policy, local planning policy number 7.5.1, minor nature development. Questions? Manager, I do have a question in relation to the exemption for temporary events. Talked about public events being not requiring planning approval where they were limited to 1 day a week, and private events not requiring approval where they're limited to 1 day a month, and that the high scale impact and intensity would be considered. I just wondered whether that would be like the zones in which that happened is also being considered. Like, for example, would it preclude residential? How would parking, noise and waste be considered? Or is there any sort of parameters being set around some of those things that cause potential scratchiness between residents and events?
Through you, Mayor Cole. Sorry, I was just looking for the specific provision.
If you want to take it on notice, that is fine.
Yes, might need to take that one on notice because I can't see the specific provision, but the intention is that they would still need to go through the event application process, and through that we would typically get the noise attenuation report, waste management, all of those details that would relate to the amenity of that, and that would be still considered by the city services. But I do take your point about it does say all zoned land under the scheme, which might be problematic, so we can look into that.
Thank you very much. Questions? Okay. The next item is advertising of new policy, restricted premises smoking policy. Questions? I had a question on this one too, because in looking at it, when you look at clause 1.1 where it says what the sensitive uses are, it says residential, childcare, education, this is sort of abbreviated from my notes, reception centres, consulting rooms, offices, restaurants, cafes, places of worship. And I just thought, where would they actually, like I was thinking about a typical town centre, and I thought, once you consider can't be adjacent to residential childcare, education, reception, offices, restaurants, cafes. I just wondered whether that means that in effect, we're saying they're just not allowed anywhere. And if that's the case, that's a prohibited use. So I wondered whether that was a bit too stringent and whether anyone's actually looked at our town centres, for example, and said, here are actually some locations where you could actually have a restricted premises.
To you, Mayor Cole, that's a good point. Just noting that under the scheme at the moment, both that shop and the restricted premise are permissible in all zones. The policy is being designed to give guidance on where they would be, I guess, most suited and most not suited. Given that that is a very long list, it would be on the assessing officer to look at the scale and the concentration of those types of uses that are listed in the policy, and consider that it would not be appropriate for this use to be adjacent to it.
Yes, I understand. I just thought that the uses were so descriptive of our, for example, town centres, that it was hard to imagine other uses that hadn't been listed, but I challenge you to find me a place where they would be next to a non-sensitive use. And then I also just wanted to check what would happen if the next door use changes, which, you know, with permitted uses that could change at any time. If we found that there was a prohibited, a restricted use, and then suddenly childcare popped up next door, is it just the case that they're already operating, so it's just as it is, or would that have an impact?
To you, Mayor Cole, this policy would be used on development applications, so it would only be considered if it was a change of use to a restricted premise, or if there was any changes that required them to have a development application that this policy would be used to assess.
So they would be immune to any changes of use next door once they're established. Is that a fair assessment?
To you, Mayor Cole, yes, if there was a use that was being proposed next door, that would not change their permissibility if they were permitted currently already.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Opolo.
Just a general question, if I may. I just want to make sure that a question whether vaping is included in this policy, because that's the new rage at the moment.
Through you, Mayor Cole, under this policy, we've really looked at the tobacco shops, which are under the definition of shop in the local planning scheme, and the restricted premises, which considers smoking under the which is a restricted premise under the local planning scheme. We do also have uses that are not listed, which are shisha bars and cigar lounges, but we are not specific on vaping.
So just a follow-up question. So do we have a policy on vaping at all?
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, we do not.
And is that deliberate?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it is not deliberate. This is in response to the notice of motion, which was regarding the public health plan and smoking. And so this is in response to that, but we're not deliberately, we haven't, I suppose, made a deliberate choice around vaping.
I'd just elaborate. It's probably because this is really about land uses in our scheme. So when we're talking about restricted premises and shops, which are tobacco shops, etc., it doesn't actually specify that that's vaping or not vaping, but you would think that those uses, if they're talking about tobacco, vape, nicotine should still be considered tobacco, I would assume.
To you, Mayor Cole, that's correct. We have put in the policy that the restricted premises definition, so the uses that come under that definition in the local planning scheme could include vape and smoke shops, as they usually come together. So you'll see that on the second page of the policy. Yes, on the second page of the policy, when it describes the definition, that it does include those vape and smoke shops because they come together. But absolutely, this is focused around smoking, as it has stemmed from our public health plan and relates to the uses as outlined in the local planning scheme.
But I think just another question on that, when we're reviewing our scheme, would the land use definitions need to be updated?
To you, Mayor Cole, we are looking into the possibility of the land uses. But of course, that would require approval from the department.
Okay. Any further questions? The next item, 5.8, place plan annual review. Questions? Is that, yes, Councillor Alexander, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Yeah, I have a number of things I'd like to know about the plan. And part of it is, it was signed off in 2016. Would we know what the total cost of the plan is? And then also what the cost of the changes, suggested changes to the plan would be? And then also how we go about agreeing to the changes as recommended. Another one asks about the wayfinding. Could we please itemise the cost of the consultation or the person that is doing the consultation, the cost of implementing a wayfinding program and the cost of the maintenance required. And also we had a presentation by, I think it was Ian Rowney, over the telephone basically, and he only presented one option to the council, and that was that there would be 6 colours and for the 6 town centres and no colour for the city of Vincent itself. Do we think that reflects the will of the council? Another thing I would like to know is, written down is, you know, given the city has had some issues with signage and visual pollution, and also given that most people have a mobile device now and there's new ways of communicating and finding your way, could we please hear why a wayfinding program is now needed and what warrants the expenditure, the maintenance, and perhaps the visual pollution that it might create? So they're the things I would like to hear about next week.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I
Are
can
you taking those now?
I can
Yep,
answer
go
all
on.
of those now. The changes in the all of the place plans and there is no additional funding required for any of the changes that council would be noting in these place plans. The total funding allocation for each of the plans is per financial year, so we do not cost them at the start of the plan, but they are costed per year. The funding allocation for the 22-23 financial year, which has been approved by council, is in the 22-23 funding allocation section. Approving these place plans does not add any additional funding. That column reflects what has been approved by council through the budgeting process. In regards to the wayfinding plan,
Sorry, so how much was that again?
the 22-23 funding allocation for each of the plans is referenced per action for each of the place plan actions. Was that in relation to the wayfinding plan itself for this financial year, it is $198,000, noting that funding is from the parking cash in lieu reserve. That is because the wayfinding plan in answer to the question of where this has come from, that is an action in the accessible city strategy. And the cost of that $198,000 is the cost to develop the plan and implement stage 1 of the plan. The cost to consult on the wayfinding plan is included in the operational budget for the policy in place team, as that consultation will be done with us and the consultant who has been engaged, which covers that $198,000.
So, sorry, so how much is it for the consultant?
I will include in the briefing notes the cost for the consultant. And what section of that $198,000 will be given to the consultant for the plan versus the implementation of the signs themselves.
Okay, so the implementation and the maintenance expected.
Through you, Mayor Cole, there is not a cost for the maintenance as the funding allocation is yearly and there will be no maintenance required in the 22-23 financial year.
Councillors, questions? Councillor,
Sorry, just, I mean,
Wallace?
just
Oh,
following
sorry,
up on a
just,
couple
just
of
one
Ron-
thing.
Sorry.
Sorry.
well, I've
um,
gone to Councillor Wallace, so can I come back to you, Councillor Alexander?
Yeah, sure. Just Tara said she was going to answer all the questions now.
Oh, sorry, you don't feel that they've all been answered?
No, no, it's
Sorry,
only
Councillor
halfway
Wallace,
through.
just bear with us while we just finalise
Yeah,
these questions.
That's fine. That was
Which-
going to be my
which,
comment.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Ron.
Which questions would you like further information on?
From Ian Rowney, we only got one option presented. And that was the option where you would have 6 colours for 6 town centres. The city of Vincent would have no particular colour. And way back when we discussed this wayfinding, it was agreed that there should be some similarity between the city of Perth and the city of Vincent, so people would not find one thing in one city and one in another.
I understand. So I'm just going to go back to the manager and say, in terms of the actual look and feel and design of the wayfinding, I would think that's a future decision of council with a proposal to come to us. Would that be correct? Or please, whatever you have to add.
Yes, absolutely. That's correct. So we presented that initially to a council workshop and we've taken all of the feedback that we received on board and we'll be presenting the revised option, considering that feedback at the September council meeting.
Okay. So we'll get a range of options.
Through you, Mayor
Correct.
Cole, no, you will get one option to endorse for advertising based on the feedback that we received at council workshop.
There is
Okay,
always an
yeah.
opportunity, Councillor Alexander, if you want to have a meeting, before that happens and go through this in more detail, very welcome to set up a meeting.
Okay.
Are there any other outstanding questions?
Yes, to just go through, given that there's a whole range of new ways of finding your way, i.e. everyone's got a mobile phone device that you click in and it tells you where to go. And given the city's concern about more signage and visual pollution, could you just explain why we were going to spend, all this money on a wayfinding project?
Do you, Mayor Cole? Absolutely. A key objective of the wayfinding plan is to remove that visual pollution. So a lot of the existing signs that are out of date or contradictory to one another or confusing will be removed and that will be the first step of the wayfinding plan. And they will be replaced by correct information that encourages people, as it is an action of the Accessible City strategy. The wayfinding plan will be encouraging people to understand where they are at the moment and the fact that they can walk or cycle to surrounding areas. So that will also be a key objective to encourage those alternative modes of transport. And by removing that existing signage pollution, there'll be kind of clear signs and directions so that people understand where they are in the context of the other landmarks within Vincent.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so just to bring it to that strategic level, the team has been given strategic direction by council through an action in the Accessible City strategy. In terms of the look and feel, I've taken on board feedback, but if there are concerns remaining, I recommend seeking a meeting with the team to sort of see what's coming back to council, to have a discussion prior to it being formalised and coming through the council process.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yep. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I wasn't anything on my behalf. I guess I don't have Councillor Alexander's list of questions before me, but the one that stuck out at the beginning was how much has been spent in total in this program since 2016. I just wanted to see if admin wanted the opportunity to take some of the questions that Councillor Alexander presented on notice to provide a response in the briefing notes.
Through you, Mayor Cole, well, we can try to provide a cost of each of the place plans and their total cost since implementation.
I mean, I guess my view was that the question wasn't responded to, so maybe Councillor Alexander could provide some further direction on it. It's not for my purposes.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'll provide that in the briefing notes.
Councillors, Councillor Uplow.
To follow up Councillor Alexander's questions, is any part of the wayfinding strategy actually covering digital assets, or is it all physical signs?
Through you, Mayor Cole, at this stage, it is all digital. It is all physical signs and not digital assets in that provision of the $198,000.
Councillor Warner.
Not really a question. I just wanted to point out a typo on attachment 1, page 6, about the 100 Town Teams event. It says that this happened in 29 June 2021. It was actually this year. So just a slight amendment there.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
This just relates to the North Perth Place Plan Action 1.3. I think I'm a bit confused. It talks about the planning framework to support the nighttime economy. And I know that we're going to be bundling a couple of actions together around having actually a separate planning document for North Perth. I'm presuming similar to what we have for Leederville, but a bit of a lower scale because it's not the same level of centre. And I just was just questioning whether the nighttime economy part is the driver in that, or whether we're rewording the action so that it's more generic. I feel that because I guess, anyway, is the nighttime economy reference in action 1.3 necessary given that we're doing this holistic review? Or should we still limit it to driving a nighttime economy?
Through you, Mayor Cole, in the North Perth Town Centre Place Plan is coming to the end of its 4-year life. In the 22-23 to 20, in the next version of the North Perth Town Centre Place Plan, I do not predict that we would be specific about the nighttime economy because we are doing that holistic work. It would reference that work.
Councillors. Okay, ready to move on. Thank you very much, Manager. A huge body of work happening in those plans. So that concludes our strategy and development item question and answer for the evening. And we now move to infrastructure and environment and 6.1 tender, i.e. 181 of 2022 water ingress works to the facade at Beatty Park Leisure Centre. Any questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. I note that the carry forward for this work in this year's budget was, I think it was 264430. And I believe that the budget, which is in the public part of the agenda, is 278128. And I'm just wondering what the plan is for that 13698 that isn't specified within the current capital works provision.
Through you, Mayor Cole. This represents about a 5% over budget.
Sorry, Jade, I'll just introduce you. We've got our manager of assets. You might not have met Jade Robbins before, but it's lovely to see you. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. So as I was saying, this represents about 5% of over budget, and there is some savings that we have realised in some other projects that haven't actually commenced and gone into RFQ award as yet, but it will be will reallocate the funds at the mid-year review for this $13,000 shortfall for this particular project.
Apologies, Jade, Manager of Building Services. I've got that wrong. Yep, any more questions for the Manager of Building Services?
I'm just thinking in terms of what our project management framework would say in terms of variation. Like if we're accepting this tender, should it be noted in the recommendation that council requests that administration reallocate funds towards it's not actually to do with the actual project. I guess it's more just if we're likely to be having these issues, particularly in the current cost climate, I think we need to be clear on how we're going to handle them from a public record point of view, and also make sure that we're consistent. Perhaps we could consider that through the week. Well, yes, I'm happy to get some advice on that now.
Thank you. Through the chair, we could amend the recommendation to just note that the additional funds would be sourced through the budget review process, and that would cap that.
Can I just ask another question? I'm slightly confused because when we first had this body of work done by Peter Baxendale, the water ingress works were discussed that being around $300,000 to $350,000. I'm going on memory here, and this was 2019. Then the former Director of Infrastructure recommended that we allocate something more like $600,000 towards this work. And now we've got a tender which is coming in under both of those, which seems reasonable in that context. So,
but it's $13,698 over what has been included in our capital works program budget for this year.
I guess I'm just asking with the history, how.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, perhaps we could take that on notice. My understanding is that the scope has actually changed over time. Different parts of the work have been done at different times.
Okay, well,
so we're not talking about like with like, I think.
Okay, could we just
can I just add to that? Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate.
Through you, Mayor Cole. From my understanding, the budget last year was around the 350,000, as you pointed out. There was some additional initial works done, and this was to the box guttering. And also we sought a more detailed scope and specification that addressed the heritage requirements of the works. So a total of 87,000 was spent in last year's budget for the works, which addresses some of the water ingress. The next stage of this works is the concreting and replacement of seal joints with heritage approved materials. We've gone to tender, and we've received, I think there was 5. They did range in price. From the confidential attachment, there was some quite higher prices provided. This one fell within the parameters of our existing budget that was carried forward, and it was also ranked as number 2 of the qualitative criteria. So we saw this as good value for council to progress with this tender.
Thank you very much. That's excellent information. It would be awesome to have that sort of information in the report that could perhaps explain that this is stage 2 of the water ingress works. That would be very useful. Thank you very much, Manager. Thank you, Director. Any further questions? Okay. 6.2, review of policy number 2.2.11, waste management. Recommendation to repeal. Yes, Councillor Apollo.
Yep, just a question. Given waste management is still an essential service across the city, particularly for residential, why is the policy being withdrawn by administration rather than just being updated for the bits that are considered to be outdated?
Through the chair, I'm happy for that to be passed on to our Manager of Waste Services, who is on screen behind you.
Welcome to the meeting, Manager.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Through you, Mayor Cole. As you know, we've had a complete overhaul of all of our waste services over the last 18 months. So all parts of this plan are now outdated or irrelevant. Additionally, we have a waste strategy and a waste plan, which is approved by DOA. So this is unnecessary sort of duplication of work and something that isn't referred to either. So there isn't a need for it.
I was thinking this is probably something that should have been repealed at the time that we adopted the strategy, and perhaps it was something that we just didn't get to at that time.
Yeah, I think for you, Michael, I think there's been such a huge body of work that we've been undertaking. We've been ticking the projects off one at a time, and then we plan to do it all at the end, I think. Yes. But yeah, certainly we could have done that.
Absolutely agree there for sure. Thank you, Manager. Any further questions, Councillor Gontaszewski?
Just in terms of some of the information in the existing policy, like around the maximum weights that will be collected by the trucks, and that the weight of the bin is the responsibility, ensuring that your bin isn't overfilled is the responsibility of the landowner. Where's that information going to be housed? Because I don't believe that's in the high level strategy, and the plan is relating to delivering the strategy. So in terms of that, is that on our website? Is that terms of service? How does the community have that information and have that publicly available?
Yeah, through you, Michael. All of that information is on our website through the compliance and bin placement information. We additionally will have tags that we'll put on people's bins if they are outside of that, and we have a bin compliance program. In terms of enforcement, there is through the local law provisions there as well. If bins weren't placed correctly, if they're overfilled, if they're contaminating neighbours' bins, etc., there is provision there. So that covers off pretty much everything.
Excellent, thank you. That's all from me.
Councillor Apollo?
Just wanted to check with strategies and plans are generally general, but a policy is something that we have to actually enforce. So I just want to make my question is the newly adopted strategy and plan something that is enforceable by the city against residents for any breaches?
Again, any enforcement would be through the health local law. There's the provision there for enforcement, not through the strategy.
It is, when you read this, it is very operational. And I think the most recent approach of council has been to have strategy, policy, and then guidelines, which is where that sort of operational stuff sits, or local laws for enforcement. Thank you, Manager. Any further questions? Okay. Item 6.3, advertising of amended policy 2.1.3, graffiti control and removal. Manager, I have a couple of questions on this one. So just in relation to, so some of the clauses in the policy talk about where the property frontage is located in the laneway. Under clause, I think I've got my clauses mixed up now because my notes are so rough. One of the clauses talked about that. So I was just wondering, does that mean that if the laneway had graffiti in it, then it would be removed if they have housing fronting the laneway? Or is this only if the graffiti was on the property fronting the laneway? So what I'm trying to differentiate is you have a laneway, it's developing a street context, but you might have a mix. You might have some fences and some opening out to the laneway. If the graffiti was further down on a fence that was not open to the laneway, would that still be removed in respect of the fact that this is a emerging streetscape?
If it was emerging streetscape, then we would have to look at that slightly differently. This was more the provision if there were a certain number of households within there with the frontage into the laneway, in which instance we would count that as private property, where we would remove it and it would be within scope. Where like you've said, where the whole laneway is being brought into use, then we would have to treat that as an in scope.
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Does that mean that the graffiti would be removed only if it was on the property fronting the laneway and not if it was down, say, 2 houses down on a fence backing to the laneway? The question is really around, are we talking about preserving graffiti-free laneways where you have housing using that as their primary street? Or does it have to be graffiti only on the property facing the laneway?
It's at this stage, it's only on the property fronting the laneway.
Okay, so can I get some further information about that? Because that's something I think I've been trying to address through this policy change, that we actually have some acknowledgement that where you do have housing facing a laneway and there's an emerging streetscape, that we are actually trying to deal with graffiti on those laneways. So probably first would seek some information about whether that's manageable and achievable from a sort of cost and resourcing perspective. And then I might flag an amendment to broaden that so that graffiti removal, where it's adjoining local government property, which would be the right of way, and it's in a laneway where you have housing facing the laneway and creating a new streetscape on the laneway, that graffiti on the fence adjoining the local government property being the laneway should be removed under the policy.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly provide some guidance on that.
Yeah. Because that was also my confusion when it talks about, in one of the clauses, it talks about that graffiti will be removed where it adjoins council property. That was also up for interpretation from my perspective around, does that mean that a fence adjoining council property being the laneway means that that's going to be removed? But it sounds like that's not the case.
No, it wouldn't be the case.
But how would we deal with a resident who comes to the City of Vincent and says, this fence adjoins City of Vincent property because you own the laneway? Why won't you remove the graffiti? Because in policy clause either 2.2.2 or 2.2.5, one of those, it says that graffiti will be removed where the property adjoins, where the graffiti is on adjoins City of Vincent property.
Yeah, I think I'll to the chair. Where into clause 2.2, it says in terms of eligible private property, it said the city will assist with the removal of graffiti vandalism from property where all of the following criteria have been met. So that's in terms of reporting where it adjoins. And then it gives further clarification that graffiti will be removed from laneways and rights of way where the property frontage is within the laneway. So
okay, so they have to be all satisfied. All right.
Yes.
So that then brings me back to this point around laneways where you have housing facing and not just being specific to graffiti on a dwelling or private property facing.
Yeah, we can give.
I'll explain. I can talk to it at the council meeting, but I think that's the crux of what.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd be also interested to know what would happen in a laneway if graffiti is visible from the street. So if you're coming down the street and you see graffiti as you walk past, maybe an invitation for more graffiti. And I was also interested to have an update on the 50% additional resource that council granted to graffiti resourcing in 2021-22, how that's going and where that's sort of been targeted, whether it's been an additional personnel or contracting, and what's the sort of
I can certainly
impact of that funding.
Yeah, I can certainly answer that in that we have actually outsourced that for our at-height work through contractors, because we did try to appoint a part-time resource and it wasn't effective. We couldn't retain them. So we've used the funding to fund at-height work, which we would throughout our sort of commercial areas and some private properties too.
Thank you, Manager. Any other questions on the graffiti policy? Councillor Alexander.
Mayor Cole, I just wanted to support you in what I think you were saying is you can drive around, wherever you drive, and you can look to one side or the other and you can see it from a main road, or you walk along and it looks pretty ugly. Or you can go down some of the back lanes. I just go walking sometimes and walk down back lanes, and you're in the middle of nowhere in a lane where no one sees it unless you go into that particular lane. So Were you suggesting there's a difference between those two?
Yes, I was saying that where graffiti is visual from the street, you know, at the opening of a laneway, as opposed to where it's deep inside a laneway.
Yeah.
And then the other point I was making about where a laneway has housing that's starting to develop that as a streetscape, and whether it's okay to have graffiti in the laneway further down, which might not be facing the laneway, but still has an impact on the development of that as a nice environment to, you know, for amenity perspective, etc.
To you, Nicole, our current approach as you enter into a laneway, anything that is visible from the street frontage, we would remove. So
that's not in the policy.
Yes.
So is that something you'd be comfortable to include in the
Yes.
policy?
Yes.
I think we need to be really clear about what it is we're doing in our laneways.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if everyone's happy to move on. Yes, we'll leave infrastructure and environment. Thank you very much, manager. And we'll go to community and business services. So 7.1 preliminary financial statements as at 30th of June 2022. Any questions?
Through Mayor Calder, to note, these were circulated very late because we had a few issues. So we're happy to take questions between now and the OCM in writing as well.
Can I ask a general question? It was just when looking at the overspends and the underspends by program, is there a way of sort of assessing any trends over time to see whether there are particular areas where there are consistently underspending or consistently overspending, and then sort of working with that team to sort of address any issues emerging there?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we can take that on notice and have a look at some data for the prior years. We will be moving to by nature and type reporting only going forward. So that program view in line with the regs won't be there anymore, but we can have a look at both and provide some data in the coming months. So.
Okay, that's a good question then. So even though, so we don't have to report, we can move into nature and type, but if council is still interested in seeing by program, would that still be available to us?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'll have to keep the data for grant submissions. So the data will be there. It just won't be presented in monthly accounts, but if there is a strong view, we could continue to report it if you like.
Okay, have a think about that. Any other questions on the preliminary financial statements? Okay. 7.2, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1st to the 30th of June 2022. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just in relation to the security services for Drag Queen Storytime, I'm assuming that we would have heard if there was incidents and that was just a precautionary measure.
Oh yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, there were no incidents. That was precautionary.
I was in attendance and our rangers were there. Did we acquire additional costs?
Oh yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I think we had one additional security guard from memory on standby, and I think that was we had a number of different contingencies in place, and I think that was us being particularly cautious on that occasion.
Yeah, that's fine. I saw the emails. Any other questions on authorisation expenditure? Councillor Oplow.
Thank you. I've got a few questions actually this time. There's a $586,000 payment on 24 June this year for the Department of Finance, the landlord lease incentive, with a reference that it's the third instalment. It's a big number. Can I just have some explanation on that, please, and background?
Through you, Mayor Cole, as part of the DLGSC lease, there's 3 incentive payments we make on that 10-year lease, and that's the third and final instalment. So they're accounted for evenly over 10 years. So while we've made a $500,000 payment, only $162,000 will be recorded as a negative revenue amount in the FY22 accounts.
So there were 3 equal instalments, were there?
Yes, that's correct.
I've got another one. The Boyan Electrical Services supply and install a switchboard and cabling at the Hyde Park toilet block for $36,000 on page 4. Does this relate in any way to the kiosk development? And if so, is that a cost that the tenant should be paying?
Thanks, Matt. We'll get a clarification on that specifically.
The the payment to J Davenport for the refresh of faces on the Beaufort mural in the Barley Street car park for $34,000. I just wanted to get indication on what the $34,000 is comparative to the original works and whether this was negotiated as part of the original commissioning.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll ask the arts team to provide us with a bit more information on that one and come back to you in the briefing notes.
Another, with the Profounder Turf Master maintenance for the Leederville Oval, $18,000. I know that there were some problems with Leederville Oval recently on the turf. Is this maintenance recoverable from the supplier because of the lost games at Leederville Oval?
Through you, Mayor Cole. So first of all, we have a regular program of turf maintenance. Turf maintenance costs are shared 3 ways between the city and the 2 waffle clubs at the ground. There is a long-standing and well-known problem with drainage on the ground. We have got some well-documented advocacy proposals that we have sought funding from state government because there is a broader issue where the ground does get waterlogged and has difficulty draining when there's heavy rain. And that's part of the issue that we have at the moment. In addition to that, the ground itself, because it is hosting 2 waffle clubs, it does have very heavy utilisation compared to most grounds. So we've got 2 home teams, if you like. So we're carrying training matches and a lot more activity on that ground. So it doesn't get to rest as well as other waffle grounds. So in answer to your question, is it recoverable? I would say probably not, because it is that particular payment that you're talking about is part of the overall program of maintenance for that ground that we are required to do. And the city's component of that is 1/3.
Okay, maybe this can be on notice whether there
Sure.
is any amount of the maintenance. And I understand it's a yearly program, but if any of the maintenance, if any of the state of the turf which caused a loss to the 3 parties, relevant parties, whether any of that could be recovered under the terms of the contract, which may or may not include this
Sure.
specific 18,000.
I'll take that on notice. Thank you.
That's one for me, if that's okay. There's a payment to Signet West in June 22 for consultancy services. This relates to the expression of interest for the Avenue and Frame Court car parks. It's a $55,000 payment, and it refers to a 50% claim. So could you just clarify the amount and the specific services that they're providing?
Did you want to answer that one?
Through Mayor Cole, we can put that into the briefing notes,
Yep.
but that would be for the work they completed under that contract, and we're probably about halfway through that process.
Just as a follow-up to that one, I did actually note down that I was interested in the Signet West total budget for the consultancy work, so I'd be interested to know that too. Thank you. Someone had the hand up, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. Just a couple of little ones for me. Just the $8,000 for T-shirt printing for Beatty Park, just to check if these are uniforms or they're for sale. I think it was the 60-year anniversary printing. And then also the equipment leasing 5.8K for a dog barking monitor. Just wondering if that's an annual fee or a one-off. $2,000 for gift cards for awards. Just wondering if that's internal or some other program, and what policy or I guess activity centre that comes under. And then the design consultancy, $11,000 each for Gladstone Street Playground and Les Lillyman Playground. If I could just understand what proportion of the overall approved capital budget is to be spent on design services rather than capital infrastructure, or whether that design service is coming out of a different budget bucket.
I'll take all those on notice. Thanks, Mayor Cole.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Sorry, just to revisit the Signet West cost, and maybe this has already been taken on notice, I'm just hoping to understand the scope of what they provided, and was the deliverable that we saw, the request for their expression of interest, the sole item that we get for $110,000, or is there other stuff behind the scenes that's being provided?
Through you, Mayor Cole, so that the contract is for their advisory commercial services. They put the document together, which council saw, which went out, and they are providing the marketing services. So they're doing the advertising. So there's advertising costs tied up with that as well, which is online and through newspapers and the like.
Could I get a very high level breakdown of that, their fee and services? Just out of interest. Thank you.
We'll put that in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Just a couple from me. I thought for the sake of transparency, the Jackson McDonald Judicial Review at 20,935, if we could perhaps have some notes around that. The reconciliation breakfast had Camberang catering at 2,400. I thought that cannot be correct. I was there and if that was 2,400 for catering,
You
then
think it was a little bit
we're in
rich?
trouble.
Okay.
Because there was also
double check.
there was other ones against catering. There was the coffee and there was a 274 against the catering. We're starting to see a few costs coming through for the Beatty Park Leisure Centre 60th anniversary, custom artwork, mermaids, etc. And I'd be really interested to get an overall project budget for that series of events, so that we're aware, including any kind of not just the event itself, but anything happening around that, anything that's coming under 60th anniversary. Thank you. Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up Councillor Wallace's question, with that question on note, with the response that's going to be on notice, can we also just have a clarification whether there is any contingent compensation based on the actual success of a tenderer and that is linked to the actual development, the size of the successful developer?
Mayor Cole, just to clarify, is there a commission or a bonus for a transaction? Through Mayor Cole, no. It's just it's the services to provide advice and marketing.
Councillors. Okay, moving then to item 7.3, investment report as at the 30th of June 2022. No? Yes, Councillor Loden.
I'll ask it. We've previously been doing some work looking at alternative ways to measure divestment or a preference around banks, and I was just hoping to get an update on that, please.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll come back to you in the briefing notes if that's okay.
Councillors. Okay, thank you. We'll leave community and business services. Thank you very much, Manager and Director, and go to Chief Executive Officer items. So 8.1.
Through you, Mayor Cole.
Oh, sorry. How could I miss that?
We've got an important one.
I've missed the very important one, which is 7.4. Excuse me, I've put a circle around it, which I thought meant I'd already dealt with it, but I haven't.
No problem.
7.4, Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan, outcome of advertising. Any questions? I guess for me, it's just again that question of how do we engage people in our engagement process? Had people come to the site, 9 people have downloaded a document. The fact they haven't provided feedback, maybe they're happy, but do we need to consider whether our engagement, when we look at things like this, do we need different approaches for different documents? It's a bit of a philosophical question. You don't have to answer that tonight, but that was just the thoughts that came to my head when reading this report.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. As you know, we've done a lot of work with the RAP working group and the Bridges group of elders. So some of the key stakeholder groups have had a lot of input into the document, but I'll certainly give some thought to the broader public, which is what I think that you're touching on there. Yeah. Okay, I'll give some thought to that.
It's about how do we engage the broader public in the reconciliation piece.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I'll take that on notice.
Thank you very much, Director. Councillor Alexander.
Could I congratulate the council on appointing Gus Maguire? I think that's a very good step to answering Mayor Cole's question. So
Thank you. I was going to announce that at the council meeting, but yes, we'll give our new member, Gus Maguire, a big shout out. No, it's fine. No, good on you for raising it. Yeah. Isn't it a fantastic thing that Gus Maguire has been appointed to the role? What's the title of the role?
Gus's title is Aboriginal Engagement Advisor.
Right.
And that is he's there to obviously bring his experience in Aboriginal culture and to also look for ways to create that bridge between the Aboriginal community and the city.
Therein lies part of the response to my question. So thank you.
There you go. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well done, Councillor Alexander. Any other questions on the Innovate wrap? Okay. Then we shall leave you Community and Business Services and move to Chief Executive Officer items. 8.1, advertising of amended risk management policy. Any comments? Oh, sorry, any questions? No, okay. 8.2, proposed repeal of policy number 4.1.33, third party mediation, Citizens Advice Bureau. Any questions? I have a similar question to Councillor Gontaszewski's question on the waste. If we repeal the policy, how do we let our community members know that this is still available?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we do provide that as we at an operational level think we need to offer it to residents or ratepayers. I'll check what information's on the website and include that in the briefing notes, but we wouldn't direct them to this policy to provide that advice. We would offer that service as soon as we thought it would be beneficial to neighbours in dispute.
Well, I guess then the question is that information only available from an officer where they see there's an issue emerging, or is that information going to be publicly accessible on a website? So if someone was having a dispute with their neighbour, they would potentially be able to see, oh, there's actually a service that I can suggest and make use of.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll check what's on the website and what's publicly available, and then the information we provide residents when we think that this might be a service which could assist.
And without causing too much work, because I don't want this to be like a trip through the archives, but I would be interested in some information just on the use, whether it's something that's taken up relatively regularly or infrequently, and whether there's been any, does CAB report back any outcomes like it's resolved, or is there any sort of way of understanding if this has been a useful service? And
through Mayor Cole, we'll check their take-up rate and the number of times it's been offered or number of times it's been used, if we can include that in the briefing
okay,
notes
as long as
well.
it's not like delving through the archives. Don't want it to be a big job, and if it's easy. Any other questions? Okay, moving then to item 8.3, proposed repeal of policy number 4.1.8, nuclear free zone, part of Vincent's history from 1995. Councillor Hallett.
Can I just flag/request, but I'll provide some wording to an amendment to include in the recommendation that we join with Mayors of Peace.
Very good. Noted, CEO. Councillor Loden.
Maybe just a question through to the Mayor, given that it is Mayors for Peace. Did you have a view on that?
Well, look, seeing as you've asked me a question, I can speak. When I read this, I thought, why are we repealing this? What's the motivation? It's been in place since Vincent began. And I think the question for me is, if not this, then what? So if we substitute this by joining Mayors for Peace, I think that would be a good thing. But if we simply repeal this and there's nothing in its place, I'm not so sure that that's, it might not be applicable, etc., but it's been a symbol of Vincent for some time. And I think that you have to query why repeal, unless there's something more modern, which Mayors for Peace seems to offer.
And I guess on that, the part of the commentary refers to 15 inner city metro councils, of which There are 3 or 4 that have a similar policy. Those 3 or 4 seem to be broadly similar councils to us in their outlook. So I'm just curious as why are we choosing to do this? What is the consequence if we choose to not do it, I guess?
Through you, Mayor Cole, council should have a policy when we need to pursue an outcome, and administration needs some guidance on how to deliver projects, programs or services. This policy isn't required for any of those purposes and hasn't been used since its inception. So the suggestion to rescind it is not about the intent of the policy. It's purely about whether or not that statement, which is already in the council decision, should be sitting on our council policy suite, and we should only have policies which we use, and we don't use this one. Would be very happy to amend the report to recommend council formally join the Mayors for Peace program.
Happy to do so if that's council's wish. Any other questions? Okay, then item 8.4, report and minutes of the audit committee meeting held on the 9th of August 22. Okay, and 8.5, information bulletin. All right, no questions. Look, we do have 2 confidential items this evening. One is a late item, but I'm hoping that you are expecting it. It's the CEO annual performance review and drafting of the KPIs for this financial year. We just wanted to make sure that we had some documents before you this evening, and that will be formally issued on Friday with the ordinary council meeting agenda. So we will need to leave our briefing live stream for these 2 items, which are effectively 11.1 and 11.2, which doesn't appear on the agenda, but we should say CEO performance review for 2021-22 and draft KPIs for 22-23. Okay,